What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Already Did It, your weekly movie podcast for movies that have been remade, rebooted, sequelized, or are unoriginal. As always, I am your host, Blake Schultz, and with me is Terrence Tatum.
Hello, everyone.
To talk about the 2019 version of Charlie's Angels.
It's crazy you have to put a year stamp in front of that.
A movie no one asked for, but boy, did we get.
Did they give it to us?
How did you like the movie, Terrence?
It was very okay. And I mean that in the every sense of the word. Like comedy, okay. Action, okay. Will I remember this when I stepped out of my seat and walked out of that hallway? I felt like I was in a time warp, and I was like, oh, I've forgotten everything that just happened a minute ago.
Well, you know, the brain erases moments of trauma.
And I kind of feel like that's what happened. Like, it was weird, because sitting in there, I did not hate the movie, but there were active moments, and I was like, what is this movie doing, and why are we here? And I thought that probably about 3 or 4 times within the film. And then I started pulling. I was like, I just remember when Cameron Diaz and them did this. And this, even though that's not a great movie either, it was a much more fun time than whatever we're doing now.
Yeah, the movie kind of, with that default, feels very old right away.
Yeah.
But like it's trying to say new things, but it says them in a clunky way.
By slapping you over the face way.
Yeah, the movie opens with Kristen Stewart just being like, well, you know, women can do everything. Yeah. Which is something I agree with.
100%.
But then you have this Tex Avery Wolf villain.
Yeah.
Who's like, anything, even construction work. And this scene goes on for
It's a 3-minute.
entire minutes.
It's a 3-minute scene before the actual scene takes off. Yeah.
Terrence, if you're a multi-million-dollar cartoon character and you've, you know, got Kristen Stewart in your penthouse suite alone, presumably for sex.
Right.
I just don't believe that you're going to spend 3 minutes berating her gender.
Correct.
It's one thing to give me a scene of like, well, see, there's oppression, and I go, I see that because I see it in the real world. They do that very well with Naomi Scott's character and her boss.
Yeah, that's great.
And I was like, this is a real moment and a real scene, and I believe this happens. But when you crank it up to a 12...
Especially when you come out the gate at a 12.
It would be like if the twist in Black Panther was like, Killmonger's been white the entire time.
Right.
And we have to kill all the white people.
Yeah, it was one of those... And it's weird because... that scene is twofold. Like, I think Kristen Stewart is doing a fantastic job delivering those lines. Like, her character is great.
She's the best
She's
part
not
of the
right.
movie.
She is not the issue. It's just the issue of how ham-fisted that scene is. And you're like, we're opening the movie with this? What are we doing?
Which is weird because it's not like also that we're taking a male-centric franchise and making it female.
Right.
So to open with being like, well, women can do anything, you're like, well, that's what this franchise has
always been doing
since the 70s.
Right.
You're not really, you know, when you even do it with like Wonder Woman or Captain Marvel, it's like, yeah, it's been the boys' club, but Charlie's Angels has always been the girls' club.
Yeah, and I'll say this because I think this is what Elizabeth Banks was trying to do, was to say that all the previous times that the Charlie's Angels has been done, when it's the 71 series or the 2 films or even the ABC reboot that lasts for 7 episodes, those were done by men with the gaze of men being the focus. Like, we're going to pretty these girls up. They're going to do what they would quote unquote call jiggly TV back in the 80s. Even with the Cameron Diaz one, while they still were more action centric because they were doing wire fu and all that stuff, they still gave a lot of sexual moments for the guys. It seems like Elizabeth was doing her best to say, hey, women, we can do just the exact same thing as guys if we're not off so sexy, too. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Counterpoint, Kristen Stewart spanks herself in this movie.
And there are moments when they're dressed as... But that's one of those things that we're as a woman who's directing, women will say, if we do it and we're in control of it, then we can decide how we look sexually. So it's taking control of it and removing it from that. And that's what she's trying to do. I just think she's doing it, too early in the movie. You can't come out the gate that heavy, and it's so strong. And then after that scene ends, there's a montage of just little girls across the world doing stuff with no context, because it never comes back up again.
I at first was like, oh, cool, we're going to see like the 3 angels as kids.
Right.
And like why they can do what they do.
Right.
Like, we're going to see the origin story. But no, these are just, I don't know, Make-A-Wish teams that wanted to be in a movie.
Right.
Like
we owe these young girls a favor, so let's go ahead and show
it had
them all around the world.
nothing to do with Charlie's Angels.
No.
It had nothing to do with the story or these characters. It was as if Elizabeth Banks just really wanted you to be like, it's for the girls.
Right. And I've seen articles where she says, people were getting complaining, why do we need the Charlie's Angels? She's going to say, well, there's 37 Spider-Man movies. It's like, yes and no. The problem is here, you're doing this because no one actually asked for this. It's different because Spider-Man keeps being the most popular character for Marvel, so you can't compare apples to grapefruit. But if you want to do this over again, you need to either flip it, and I'll get on to that later, or you can't solely say that I just felt like doing this again, but this time doing the exact same thing, but let's have a female director, because that's not enough to be like audiences come to see this, because we've seen versions of this that we've liked or did not like before. Just putting a female director, because it's not the direct. We can't tell who the director is if we don't know who Elizabeth Banks is. That means absolutely nothing to an average audience.
I was gonna say it's also a much bigger challenge, and I'm all about Mulan should have a female Chinese director, and Black Panther should have an African American director, and Spider-Verse should have everything.
Correct.
And Charlie's Angels should have a female director, but if your new take is just I'm a woman, I feel like you miss a big opportunity. And maybe I'm wrong because I'm just a white man.
Yeah.
But I feel like you're not really digging deep enough into what's going on right now with anyone. And instead of really being there are men who are going to be shitty to you at your job. And to your point of well, now it's us doing it and we can sexualize ourselves and that's a different message. Why isn't that in this narrative?
Yeah, actually, I think that needs to be heavily placed throughout the film. I think the movie should have opened with Naomi Scott's half of her story, because that is the better story and a little bit more of a subtle way to tell you that women have been getting crapped on at work they're not listening to you guys. So that felt more natural, but I think you want to start with an action sequence. So I get why you start with that one, but just cut out all of that other stuff.
You could have done that whole scene, because that character is just silly for the whole movie.
Correct.
So it also doesn't make sense to me that he would be this Pepe Le Pew running around, but also being women are terrible, but please sleep with me.
I also think, and I know she wanted to do it, but I also think this is one of the few times where I don't think attaching yourself to the entire universe worked in this movie's benefit.
No, not at all.
I felt just this is bloated now, because now the history of having the Cheryl Ladd and Farrah Fawcett version, also with the Cameron Diaz, Lucy Liu version, all of those mixed in. You're oh, cool, we've just continued this on and now we're this big global Bond type thing. It's now this world is so big and small at the same time.
It also made their twist really feel like it was kind of giving the middle finger to the history of the franchise. When it was well, it's the first Bosley that's 100%. Now the villain. I was 100%. So
to have
all this history that you're trying to have, you're just throwing out.
Away. I almost feel because it's a small thing, but when he's going through the code, they're saying how their passwords are to go in. They say he's 001. I'm it would have been better if you made him the 8th one, because if you make him the original Bosley, and then all of this is for naught. He just didn't really care about this. It also
confused me, because I don't know the 71 version well enough, and at first I was was Patrick Stewart Bosley? Is this a big deal that he's back doing this role?
No, because again, let me say this. I don't know, because I was not born. I was born after the first one ended, but I don't think it's attached, because it's no mention of it in the 2000 and 2003 version, because Bill Murray plays one and then Bernie Mac plays one of the Bosleys in those two films. So it's weird. Bosley has been kind of already approved to be a code name, so that part I don't have a problem with. But the fact that Patrick Stewart is labeled as number 1, and then we basically turn that on its head, makes this entire franchise feel very cheap, that we can easily just throw away a character like that and make him a villain.
Well, and to kind of shoehorn in at the very end this well, I was supposed to be Charlie when he died, and you're like, well,
wait,
we have no context.
Right, it's like I don't remember that enough to know if that's.
You never told me that Charlie died in this movie, so now you're like shoehorning in this twist that I actually could have been really cool.
I could have been down for. A lot of it doesn't work for me too because Patrick Stewart spends a great deal of time off screen. Like we almost forget that he's a character in the movie until all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's right, I forgot he was here. And that's just the way that this film is shot. Let me say this: the actresses in this movie, Naomi Scott, Kristen Stewart, and Ella Balasky, I believe is the other young lady's name. They're all fine. I think they're all fine separately. I think Naomi is second after Kristen Stewart, and then Ella is last. My issue is that they don't have chemistry together. I think they all are great separately.
Yeah.
And they're all doing their own thing greatly. Like, not the naive, I don't know how I got here, fish out of water type thing is great for Naomi. I think Kristen Stewart's great as the plucky. She actually, I would never have thought this role would have been hers because she didn't play it against type so much.
She's so good in it.
And she's really good at it.
She's a delight to watch.
And Ella's the badass. But together, they don't feel like they ever have any chemistry together. And therefore, their chemistry is bland. The comedy, which you would think that Elizabeth Banks would be kind of good at, other than when she's focusing on Kristen Stewart or Naomi in their moments apart from the rest of the team, comedy doesn't work. It's all kind of like very bland.
Right.
And the action sequences are not very memorable. It's just a weird hodgepodge of stuff that like nothing works. Whereas I think the Cameron Diaz versions leaned into the comedy, so the comedy was high. They used the wire fu sometimes too much, but it was stylized. This doesn't have a style. It's kind of just like, we're here.
Well, and it follows, like, once you get past the messages the movie is trying to convey, everything else is so by the numbers.
Very much.
Like this Callisto device that I'm pretty sure Calypso is something somewhere in some spy
I think
movie.
One of the Bond movies, I feel like that's been around.
Yeah, it's somewhere.
Or Mission Impossible.
Right. This, like, blanket device that can do anything. It stays in a briefcase the whole movie.
Yeah.
There's the red herring. There's the person who's doing it. We're just going to sell it to the highest bidder. These are all just the same things we've done in this genre of movie forever.
Right.
So to really like come to the gate and be like, here's our new movie, and you're asking me why we're doing it, if the best you can say is because they've made 12 Spider-Man movies, I'm going to posit that each one of those movies was about something else and more reflective of what we were doing at the time, and what you've done is just copy and pasted every action adventure movie together.
It's clear that if that is your response, and this sucks, I do think a woman should be directing Charlie's Angels, but if that is your response, it's clear you didn't have a vision as what you wanted to say for this. Like, if that's what you're going to be, like, I just want a woman to do this, then you don't have anything actually to say, and we should have probably let this gestate a little bit longer before we go to the bed.
I think that's kind of how I felt. I felt like Elizabeth Banks directing and even the screenplay didn't have anything to say beyond,
let's just do this again.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Which again, I think is just a big missed opportunity. I think you could have really done something with this franchise today and kind of everything else going on in the entertainment industry, in all the other industries and all the Twitter movements and everything else.
Considering how big the women movement is, the female movement is going right now, this should have. It felt like it was trying to do that, just went about a very hollow and quick way of doing that, and therefore it all just feels like a little bit ham-fisted and undercooked at the same time. Like they spent money to have Ariana Grande do the entire soundtrack and co-produce it, but no one cared. Like none of this is working.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah, and they do the big thing at the end where it really is just like, well, it's. All of the men were evil, and all of the girls are part of Charlie's Angels, and you're like, well, this also is, again, missing the point. I'll use, like, Black Panther again. It's like, that was not a movie where then they were like, the man.
Only the black man.
It wasn't Undercover Brother, where they were just like, get the man, and like that, which is, a satire and a farce and a comedy and a great movie.
Yeah.
But it's like, that would have been a big turnoff, I think, even to African-American viewers, if they were like, oh, we're just gonna, all right. You're just gonna show up and be like, it's a black superhero, and we're gonna go fight this white CEO.
There are way more levels within something like the way they handle Black Panther, when I don't think any type of levels happen. It's all surface level.
Or even like Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
Like these are other movies that kind of also showed up and were like, we can play too, but we're really gonna say something and like look at this time and this era and what we had to go through to get to a certain place and why we're still doing it now. And like none of the three characters in Charlie's Angels, I think, really had a strong theme behind their arc either. They were all kind of just like pieces on a board. It was like Bosley's our Leonardo character, and Kristen Stewart's going to be our Raphael, and Naomi Scott's going to be Donnie. Mike, and and Donnie, and it feels very flimsy and loose.
Archetypes. Like Ella is the fighter of the one. She's the one, like, if you're doing hand to hand, they all can fight, but she's the one that if you want her to fight the guy, she's the one to do it because she was in MI6. You have the brain, and you have the witty one who breaks the rules and is kind of annoying to people. But that's what and that's all I know about them. Like, I don't know anything about their character whatsoever. And when
they try to add it, you just like meet this like random new character who's like, I don't trust you, but I guess I have to now. And Kristen Stewart's like, I actually grew up in. This is probably how I felt. This is gonna sound really bad. Probably how Elizabeth Banks was when Kristen Stewart's like, well, I had problems too, and they're like, weren't you rich and privileged? Yeah. And I was like, I feel like that's the movie. Is Elizabeth Banks is like, I also have gone through things, and we're like, did you?
Did you though?
Seems like everything is going fine.
Yeah. It's weird because I just don't think Elizabeth. I think she did a good job with Pitch Perfect too. I don't know if Elizabeth Banks, and this is probably a passion project, and Sonya was like, "Here, just take it." But I just don't think she was the person to direct this yet. Like, this shouldn't have been her second feature film because I just think it's a little. What she's going for is bigger than what she's actually putting on screen. Because I think she was maybe trying to do something more, but just. Writing wise, missed the mark, and I think this film. There's some good moments in it.
There's some good action in it.
There's some really good action in it, but it's just undercut by some crazy plotting together of scenes and some just mismanaged comedy.
And some of this bad comedy, Terrence.
Some of the comedy is terrible.
That has no real bearing on the emotional weight of a choice. Yeah, Naomi Scott kills a man. Yeah, and is like. The whole bit is, he's fine. Right. And then we just cut to them taking him away.
Right, and they just show a video of him being tarped over, and I'm like, wait, so...
Was that supposed to be funny? Or is she now going to get to the base and be like... Are we going to have our Doctor Strange moment where he's just like, I was a doctor and I've just killed a man?
There's definitely a mishandling of what actually is reality. And when you do comedy like this, it's a mishandling of what's reality and what's comedy. And I think this has a hard time merging those two together. Yeah. Because there's some violent... These angels actively kill people. Right. Like, consistently. But it doesn't seem like there's any weight to them murdering people.
Yeah, and they keep making this joke of like, he'll get up. I mean, unless he doesn't. And it's like, these are just innocent people. Right. Like, even in like an Austin Powers or the old Charlie's Angels movies or even Undercover Brother, the people they're killing are at least the villain.
They would subdue the people that are... Like, that guy was a security guard just doing his job because there's somebody randomly running around and he wasn't actually trying to kill you. He's like, well, there's somebody breaching stuff.
No, I broke his trachea.
Now I'm going to blow up his brain.
But there was never any scenes of like Naomi Scott being like, well, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Like, there was, like, when they're like, we're going to go train you to be an angel. In theory, that would have been her moment to be like, well, I'm not killing
Like, I don't want to murder people.
Certainly not my friends and coworkers. Right. You ripped me out of my life.
The security guard liked me enough that me coming in with a new hairstyle, he's like, oh, come on through. It's good to see you. And I murdered him.
And, like, don't get me wrong. That was another, like, oh, well, like, see, it's the harassment's everywhere. And even this guy's doing this. And there are real moments where they do that. And then there's these just, like, cartoonish versions of it that are like, well, who talk? Even, like, I'm not a sexist, so I don't know. But I have to assume that even the sexists aren't sitting down and being like, now listen here. A construction worker?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't happen.
This definitely feels like, and it's been said that, like, Elizabeth Banks is a feminist, which is great. That's who should probably direct a film like this. But I just think that when you're doing a film, especially when you only have like an hour, 2 hours, an hour 58 to play with, you need to be a little bit more tactile with how you present that in film form, because it sometimes can come off as propaganda and fluff as opposed to you telling a detailed story.
It is also like I think we're getting that message a lot in our movies now, which is good. But I do think there's at least a group of people who are a little like, okay, we get it, we got it. Like
there are. I mean, that could be why. Yeah, that could be why there's a turn off. But like, yeah, I do think there is some to that. That didn't affect me, and I didn't stop me from wanting to, because I was quasi interested, because I do overall like the Charlie's Angels franchise. Like I actually am one of the few who watched the 7 episodes that ABC tried to do in the reboot, the reboot that no one else saw with Minka Kelly.
But is it in continuity?
It's the only one out of all the series that they're like, we won't pay attention to that one. That one didn't happen.
Yeah, no, there's always something that doesn't exist.
The live action Turtles, that did not happen.
No, but I would watch a crossover with them. Yeah, it really just misses its mark, and it kind of tricks you every now and then with like cool locations and cool action.
There's a great chase sequence in here. The whole them chasing after the derby is great, and it's like, oh, now we're going back to just standing around talking for like another 20 minutes.
That's fine.
Like her static shot, like when it's in action, she's good. When she's in the static moments, I'm like, well, there's nothing happening here, because the way she shoots and the way there's no comedy. There's a bit in here that I was just like, what is this doing in this movie, where they go on and for some reason Ben Affleck gets a shrapnel out of nowhere. I'm like, why is Ben Affleck being crapped on as Batman? And it has nothing to do with anything that's going on in this film right now.
Yeah. And then they just took other things out of other movies. Like that whole wardrobe is just Kingsman.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool though, because they showed some of the old school outfits that like the Drew Barrymore and Lucy Liu wore, and some of the originals, and some of what Farrah Fawcett and them wore. So that was cool. There was a way of doing nods again back to the original series. I just felt like at that point you have to go out of a lot of ways to let me know that this is the one safe house, considering that now you've told me there are so many safe houses, that this is the one safe house that the Charlie's Angels from 2003 outfits ended up in this one spot.
Because we only have one doctor for this whole organization.
It's just one of those ones, like when you go big, you also have to remember, like, oh crap, some of the logistics of this stuff do not work.
Yeah, the world building in this movie was very ineffective. Because even to be like, well, it's a giant global organization now, that doesn't really give me any context to like what we're doing.
Oh, yeah.
Or even like why Bosley 1 is betraying everybody. If we're
this big, why didn't you just turn the entire group evil? Like, they're listening to you. You could do stuff subtly, be like, all right, cool, I'm going to take this, and we're going to take this, and all of a sudden you're like, huh, we're the bad guys now, but oh well.
Right, like just build Hydra.
Right. Yeah. But it seems like they were so focused, like, the guy is the bad guy, all women are and they're like, well, that's all we need to tell. We just need to tell that if you have a penis, you're evil. And that's kind of what they go with, which is a weird way to like sort of morph what this franchise has become. Because a lot of what those the previous ones, Bosley was a huge part of it. Male, and I don't care if it's a female Bosley, but Bosley was a huge impact onto what they did. So just to see, like, yeah, guys are the devil, and now we're going to run an entire female organization. Like, okay. Cool.
Well, that's fine, but what about all of the other Bosleys that were saying goodbye to him?
It's like, Michael Strahan is like, well, I guess I'm just screwed because I happen to be a guy. I'm out.
Yeah, it was a very odd twist. And even that party didn't really make sense to me, because like suddenly the guy who's selling the thing doesn't really realize he's selling it. So then we still like kill his entire party.
So it reminds me a little bit of...
So did he have no real guests?
Yeah.
Did he somehow have a party that was just terrorists and spies, even though he was unaware of the story?
Right. It reminds me a lot bit of Mission Impossible 1 with Tom Cruise, that there are so many, but this does just a way clunkier and worse way of doing it. But the reverse twist, and then, oh crap, this guy happens to be now reversed to this. Like, what? I don't care. One, I don't know what's happening, but two, I don't care, because none of this matters. Like, this is irrelevant to me. And that's where I finished as like, I don't know who's on what side, and I don't care.
And what a just like weird ending.
It's so weird.
Just the last, like, this odd bit, and then we just go to credits.
Yeah.
And have a montage of old training sequences.
Yeah, we're training her, and then she's back, and then after the credits, I don't know if you took off, then there's a whole point where she gets her tattoo. And I was just like, what? This just feels like, that definitely felt like a Lord of the Rings type of moment. Like, we don't have an ending. It was like, we're going to stop and start and stop and start. And I was like, this that montage of training sequence felt like, and this is where, again, Elizabeth Banks clearly doesn't know what to cut and what to keep, but it felt like she went to all of her female friends, like, guys, we're doing Charlie's Angel, and it's a women empowerment film, so I want you all to come through. And all the ladies are like, sweet, we don't even need to do the script, we'll just come through for a day. And Elizabeth shoots it, and it's all happy, and they watch like, oh, that's what this movie is? Oh, shit.
Well, not a lot of people saw what this movie is.
Yeah, no one turned out for this flick, which... part of it is because I think some of it, you can read some of the super female, I'm going to beat you over the face with it type of stuff that this movie was giving. But I also think, unlike the 2000-2003 one, I think the biggest thing is that this movie has three leads that are way less known than Cameron, Lucy, and Drew were at the time when those films came out.
Oh yeah, they were enormous.
Cameron was coming off of There's Something About Mary, and Drew Barrymore was off of Wedding Singer and Ever After, and Lucy Liu had Ally McBeal was one of the highest rated shows on TV at the time. So those were three names that were huge. Those movies cost like $90 million because of just the salary, but they made like $250 each. And at a time when there was no overseas money, that's just domestic.
Well, that was also like, it was back then.
Right.
And it's really hard to come back twice.
Correct.
Like, you're either a franchise that gets a movie all the time.
Right. And then you continue on. Like, if that 2003 one came out, and then all of a sudden they did another one in 2009, and they did one in 2005, like Mission Impossible, where it stays in the zeitgeist, then you can probably get away. For you to go away for 16 years and be like, whoa, no.
Yeah, it's what happens to the Terminator movies, where it's like, we show up, we do the exact same thing we did a decade ago, and we go home. And most people are like, well,
I've seen
why wouldn't I just watch the better one over here?
Watch the ones I like that are actively on Netflix right now. And I think that's the other thing. This is what I was saying earlier. I think there needed to be a flip. If you're doing Charlie's Angels at this point in time, whereas the Charlie's Angels with Drew and them became more of a comedy that had action, I think this one you almost just lose the comedy, just become like a drama, like an action drama. Like, you have to completely change the course of what you're doing. Sort of like 21 Jump Street was a drama on television and then it became a comedy in TV, or same with Baywatch, to lesser extents. But you get what I'm like. You have to kind of go the opposite way if you want to get a new audience, because doing the exact same thing at this point, now that we have a streaming device coming out of every hole that we have, I can just find the original Charlie's Angels, or find the Charlie's Angels that I like without having to spend money to go watch these three girls that I don't really know.
Yeah, it's really quite a shame.
Yeah.
Because I think there was a good movie in this.
I do think there's a good movie in here. I think about 30 minutes of cutting room floor and some tweaking and tightening here and there, and probably a better female director.
I would also make the argument that your story shouldn't be written by two men.
Yeah, I am confused as to why women do these female empowerment movies, and they're like, I'm going to direct you, we're going to have an all-female cast, and they're like, the writers are still guys. Like,
and I really think the core of this movie's problems is that you had two guys who were probably making a movie by committee, and we're like, we're going to get the younger females, and it's going to be our, like, go women movie, and we're going to give it to Elizabeth Banks, and she's going to take care of the rest.
This was definitely, unlike the McG ones, where I think they were trying to go for multi-quadrants, because they were still sexualizing the girls quite a bit. This one is actively just women, and the women were like, nah, we're good. And if you don't have the guys, because all the guys went to go see Ford versus Ferrari, and the women are probably either dating, going with them, or just staying at home and watching Disney Plus all freaking week. No, I'm good. Like, we're not going to. 8.6 is a terrible number to jump out to when you're cost about $50 million to make. Like, you're not going to make your money.
You're done. They're going to be out of the theater next week.
Yeah.
And Frozen 2 is going to show up.
We get Frozen 2 and Knives Out and all stuff coming out week after week. This movie will be forgotten quickly. It's one of the bigger bombs. Like, the budget's only 50, but that's still, for this size of a film, is pretty substantial.
And it doesn't even have like a post-mortem going on. Like, when Terminator bombed 2 weeks ago, there was this like small, but it was there, like Twitter movement of like, well, guys, no, it's
actually good.
It's good. And there's just
people are leaving Charlie's Angels like it was okay as a B+ cinema score, which means it's okay, it's mediocre. It's got a 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. The fans seem to be liking it a little bit more, but the people who are going to see it are the ones who are actively Charlie's Angels fans. So that's a hard score to quantify with the fan score. Critics are 60, and they're not hating it or loving it. They're just saying it's there, and that might be worse.
It's much worse,
right?
That's much worse.
Yeah,
there's nothing worse to me than a movie that's just like, here it is.
We film stuff.
Have you ever read Save the Cat? We have made it by the numbers.
Yeah.
We let this one boil by a committee.
And there you have it.
It has a franchise on it.
We slapped a name on it. It's good to go, guys.
All right. Well, do you have more to say?
I don't.
All right. Well, that's our show, guys. Leave us a review on iTunes and follow us on Facebook.com/groups. That's Hollywood Already Did It and Hollywood ADI. And we will see you next week.
Later.